Right. So we are good to go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome into your first critical reasoning session. This session will be an overview of critical reasoning. So we'll try to get on the same page when it comes to critical reasoning on the GMAT, and we'll spend some time discussing some of the ground rules that we should be on the same page on. Now, I'm excited to do this. And I would like to say, thank you for joining in on Sunday, the day of the World Cup final. And I'll try not to take too much of your time. We'll try to keep this relatively short and focused in terms of what we are covering today. Okay, so a very warm welcome to all of you. Let's get started with introductions. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about myself first. So, my name's Ajitesh, and I have because this is a session about GMAT critical reasoning. I have taken the GMAT 4 times, and I have got a score that is 99 percentile or above each of those 4 times. So I've been teaching for the GMAT for more than 10 years now, and I've taken the GMAT 4 times in that much time. My latest GMAT was just this 7th of November, like just, 12 days ago. So just very recently, I took the new GMAT, and some of you might be thinking about whether you want to take the old GMAT or the new GMAT, and that's also something that I'd like to get to know from you guys. So let me turn this over to you, and from you, I would like to know a few things. I would like to know, you can introduce yourself with your first name, but the most important things that I would like to know from your side. So starting with which exam you're planning or which exam you're targeting, right? Are you targeting the old GMAT or are you targeting the new GMAT, which is called the Focus Edition? And what is your target date? When are you planning to take the exam? What kind of score are you targeting? And finally, just a small piece of information, if you could share. Are you planning to take the GMAT for the first time? Is this going to be your first attempt? Or have you taken it before? So let's start. We'll go in the same order that we see on the screen. So, Kiran, we'll start with you. Please go ahead. Feel free to unmute and let us know.
Yeah. Hi Ajitesh, I'm Kiran and I'm thinking of taking GMAT Focus Edition and yeah, I'm a first attempt. But I have been preparing for the classic edition like for the past 3 months, but yeah, I couldn't focus much. So I'm thinking of taking Focus Edition by Feb end.
Got it. And do you have a target score also in mind?
90 above 97 percentile because yeah.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Kiran. Mihir, can you hear me? If you can, just enable your microphone. It is on the top left of your screen. Just let me know if that's working. Okay, I think we're not getting audio from Mihir. Let's move on to Parikshit. Parikshit, please go ahead.
Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Parikshit. I'm still confused whether to take old GMAT or Focus Edition, but more or less I'm inclined toward GMAT Focus Edition. My target date is around February, March, since I have time and I'm planning to, apply applications from round one, which will be starting from August. The target score, I'll give a context with respect to older GMAT score. I was targeting anywhere between 720 to 750. It will be my first attempt. I have tried, preparing for GMAT 1.5 year back, but I had kind of dropped off because of some other priorities. Again, starting, GMAT preparation. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, let's now move on to Simran. Simran, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Simran. I plan to take the GMAT Focus Edition. My target date, I think, should be Feb end, sometime in February. I think I'll take a call when I'm a little deeper into my prep, but Feb end seems to be a good time. My target score would be 97 to 98 percentile. And this is my first attempt. I've tried to prepare for the GMAT earlier, but I had different exams to write and some other personal commitments in between. So yeah, I think now I'm ready to start preparing full fledged. So here I am.
Awesome. Thank you, Simran. And now let's move on to Shohini. Shohini, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Shohini. So actually, I was preparing for GMAT and I have given the old GMAT version before. So I'm still targeting the old GMAT before the last end date around January 31st. Target score is around, I think, 700-ish. And yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Shivani. Now let's ask Vansh. Vansh, is it possible for you to enable your microphone? You should see a microphone icon on the top of your screen. Oh, there you go.
Hi, Ajitesh. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
I can hear you, Vansh. Please go ahead.
Yeah, great. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing great. So yeah, I gave GMAT twice. I gave like the classic version of GMAT twice. Scored in the range of 600. So again, I'm planning for the focus edition, and I have registered for my exam on 30th of December. So hopefully, I'll be having a great uh, New Year party. If I have a great score around like 96 to 97 percentile. So yeah.
That's amazing. So you're looking to take the GMAT focus pretty soon. I think most of us are looking to take it in Feb. Vansh is looking to take it at the end of December, and Shoini is looking to take the so-called classic GMAT, right? The current GMAT. Okay, fair enough. So we've got quite a few people looking to take the GMAT within the next few months. And I think over here we have to take a look at the fact that critical reasoning is an important part of the verbal section. So that's one of the things we'll focus on in just a few moments, like what you can expect in terms of what you'll see on the day of the GMAT. Okay, now in terms of what we do, right? So I'm just going to quickly walk through the approach. I think, in a nutshell, our approach is to trust our students, right? So there are some tutors who believe that, we must like micromanage our students, tell them, every single step what to do, right? So it's almost like the students are coming back and they're almost, being told what to do for every single thing. Now, that's not our approach. Our approach is to trust you, that you are skilled, that you are motivated, right? And what we try to do is we try to give you information, right? So I will definitely give you my opinions. So whenever we discuss something, I'll tell you what I think, but I won't tell you that you have to do the same thing. So I'll try to give you the pros and the cons, the advantages and disadvantages, and then you can make up your own mind about what you would like to do in that kind of situation. Now, why is this important? This is important because we are typically looking at scores that are not easy, right? We're looking at getting good scores. And for these kinds of scores, it's not enough to just tell the test taker what to do, because on the day of the exam, it won't be me taking the exam, right? It'll be you taking the exam. So what we need to do over here is make sure that we build you up, your ability to take the right calls on the day of the exam. Now, specifically, there are two things that I want to discuss over here. In terms of what good test takers are willing and able to do, right? Good test takers are comfortable taking risks and using their intuition. Sometimes when people are taking an exam, they think, oh, this is maybe I just need to be absolutely sure about everything. That's not true. I can tell you from my own personal experience. In fact, my personal experience writing the GMAT just, like less than 2 weeks ago, I am not 100% sure about everything all the time, right? In quant, I can definitely say that it takes a lot of effort. IR, which is part of the DI section, is relatively comfortable for me, but this time I got, a complete surprise. Verbal, I don't get so many surprises, but the point I'm trying to make is even in the verbal section, there was an RC question where I was just a little bit, 50-50 between two choices. And then I used the new review and edit feature in the Focus Edition to get back to that question and review it after I had finished the verbal section. So just be aware of this, that at some point you may have to take risks during your test, and you should be comfortable doing that. So you should recognize that we have to take risks at certain points. Some of you will have to do this because of time management issues. Just to make sure that you finish the exam properly, you may have to maybe guess on a couple of questions and move on, things like that. Using our intuition is also very important, because it's not that you will always have a formula for every possible situation on the day of the exam. So you'll have to trust yourself, you'll have to develop your test taking abilities or skills and use that on the day of your exam. Another quality of a good test taker is that a good test taker is flexible with his or her approach. on the day of the exam, depending on the situation that they see in front of them and the question that they see. To give you some small example, sometimes students ask me, what is the time that I should aim for? Like, how much time should I give to every question? The answer is that it depends, right? It depends because maybe you have a lot of time left, right? And you can afford to give more time to a particular question. Or maybe you're under time pressure and you're taking less time, right? So you should be comfortable with the fact that on the day of the exam, you could be flexible with your plan as well. So what we want to do over here is make sure that we're good enough in terms of our test taking skills also to think on our feet and adapt to the situation that we see on the day of the exam. Okay, so that was a quick round of introductions. Now, at this point, I just want to remind everyone that you are absolutely welcome to ask your questions at any point during this session. You don't have to wait till the end. If you have a question, just use the raise hand feature or unmute yourself if you think that that's an appropriate time to ask your question. I will either address your question at that time, or if I think that we could better address it at a later point, I will let you know. Okay, quick check. Let me have a yes in the chat window if everyone's comfortable with what we've discussed till now. Okay, excellent. I've received 5 yeses. Shohini, this is okay, right? Perfect. All right. Now let's talk about critical reasoning on the new GMAT. So that's the focus edition. Now, the verbal section as a whole is going to have 23 questions. 23 questions for which you'll be given 45 minutes. What this basically means is you have an average of 157. This is slightly less than 2 minutes for every question that you see. And this is across both critical reasoning and reading comprehension. So 157, that's the number you need to remember. That's the magic number that you have to target. So 157 average. And now let's drill down to critical reasoning. So now in terms of critical reasoning, you're going to see 9 to 13 questions. Now, why do you get this range of questions? The answer is simple. So on the focus edition, you basically have critical reasoning and you have reading comprehension, right? Now, there are also, I suspect, some experimental questions. Quick check. Have you guys heard this term before? Experimental questions? Okay, so right, so almost everyone's heard of this term. So an experimental question is when the GMAT includes certain questions that may not be tested, may not have been tested yet. The main point is they introduce questions that they are looking to evaluate. They want to get data on those questions, and the reason they do this is they want to develop questions for future GMATs. So experimental questions are questions that you don't get scored on, but those questions will be used in future GMATs for other test takers. And that's where this variation comes in from. Typically, what this means on the day of your exam is you're going to see either 3 passages or 4 passages. This is what it means practically for you. 3 passages is typically going to be better for us. RCs are usually going to involve extra reading time. So I would prefer 3 passages over 4 passages any day. But in case critical reasoning is a strength, then maybe you would prefer to see 3 passages instead of 4 passages. Now, this is not under your control, right? But you should be ready for this. Now, in case you're interested, on my exam, I got 10 CR questions. And of course, over here, I'm talking about the actual GMAT exam. I've taken a couple of practice tests also, and in one of them I got 10 CR, and in the other one I got 13 CR questions. So this is the range that I've seen. I've also seen some of my students report 9 CR questions, so that's where you're seeing this range come from, 9 to 13. Now, just a quick check. Does this sound good to everyone? Does this fit with your experience, your knowledge of the Focus Edition? Let me have a yes in the chat window. And of course, if you have questions, just unmute and feel free to ask your question. Okay, we've received a few yeses over here. Perfect. Now, let's talk about the task, right? So in critical reasoning, the task is very simple. You have to select the best option out of the 5 options given to you. Now, this sounds very simple, but we're actually going to spend a little bit of time discussing this in a few minutes, not immediately, but in a few minutes, because it sounds simple, but there's a lot that goes on behind this. Now, what I want to talk about is the importance of timed practice. Now, remember how I said that we don't force you to adopt, one approach. Instead, we want to have a discussion. We want to tell you, okay, look, these are the possible advantages or the pros and the cons, right? So that you can take a call. Because I think this is very important. I think the question from my side is, has anybody heard this like somewhere online, or maybe one of your instructors or your friends has said this, that you should do untimed practice, that you should focus on untimed practice? Don't time yourself, just solve the question, give yourself as much time as possible. Feel free to unmute if that's something you've heard before. Parikshit's heard this before. Vansh and Mihir have also heard this before. Okay, Kiran as well. Now, maybe we're getting a couple of other responses. Simran. Okay, so Simran's been told, okay, time yourself after a little bit of practice. Fair enough. Let's discuss the advantages of untimed practice. Right? So what does untimed practice give you? Untimed practice gives you, let's call it room to explore, room to think, right? So if you're timing yourself and you're under a lot of time pressure, sometimes you don't get the time to really, apply the concepts that you've been learning or really think through something. The way I would put it is, you don't get the time to explore best practices, right? So the best way to think about this, or a complete way to think about something, you don't get the time to do that if you're doing time practice. So untimed practice is good in that sense. But timed practice is exam like, and that's very important. If you keep doing untimed practice, what you're going to do is you're going to end up not getting information that is relevant to your exam. So you're going to get a sense of your ability or your performance that may not translate one on one to what you're going to see on the day of the exam. And that is also something we need to be careful about, right? So I think all of us can see that there are advantages and disadvantages, right? So what we recommend is, right? So what I think is the best thing to do is to combine timed and untimed practice. Just to give you a quick example, let's say you have 10 questions, right? These 10 questions, instead of doing them only timed or only untimed, first solve them timed, right? And over here, you can set yourself a time limit that you're comfortable with. You don't have to go for like a super aggressive time target. So you can set yourself a time limit that you're comfortable with. And then without looking at the answers, solve the same questions untimed, right? Now, let's quickly talk about what's going on over here. First of all, you're doing 10 questions, or you could be doing 20 questions. It doesn't really matter. 23 questions if you're simulating the entire section. The point is that you're not doing this at a per question level, because a single question, could take you maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds. It could take you 3 minutes. It could take you 4 minutes, right? I think the maximum time that I spent on one of my verbal questions was something like 4.7 minutes or something, my ESR shows. So there's going to be variation in your questions, right? Especially if it's an RC. The first question of an RC is going to involve reading the passage, and if it's a long passage, a lot of that reading time will also go into that. So per question timing is not going to be very effective. What you want to do is you want to pick up a bunch of questions, like at least 10 questions, and then time yourself on that set of questions. So next, what do? We take that set and we solve it timed, right? And then remember, without looking at the answers, you solve the same questions untimed. Now, if you're thinking that I've already seen these questions before, so is that really a fair thing to do? Remember, you haven't seen the answers yet. So the only variable that's changing is the amount of time you give yourself. Now, you may be about to see where I'm going with this. After you're done solving your questions timed and untimed, then you check your answers and you get your 2 scores. So you get your timed score and you get your untimed score. And then you can compare the two, right? To see how much of an impact time pressure has on your accuracy. The point is, using this approach, you'll get the best of both worlds. You will be able to get a chance to apply your problem solving skills in a timed environment. So you will develop skills that are relevant to your actual exam. You will also get the ability or the chance to solve your questions untimed, to develop the thought processes that you should be using in future question solving sessions. Quick check: is everyone comfortable with this? That Parikshit, please go ahead.
Ajitesh, I have a question over here. So, I mean, you're saying that, if my understanding is correct, let's say I'm taking 10 CR questions, I time it out, I mark my all the options that I see is correct, right? And
Mhm.
in parallel, I don't, time them, and then I solve those parallel questions, right? I mean, don't you think, like, since I have already read those questions, right? So I will have some background, and while again solving it without, any time foundation, right? I will not be able to fathom, right? How I'm doing with timed approach and untimed approach.
So, just to be clear, you are initially solving those questions timed, right?
Yes. Or I mean, vice
And
versa. Let's say I'm first going with untimed approach, and then I'm going with timed approach.
oh, you should definitely not switch the order. So, the
Okay.
first one should be timed, and then
Hmm.
without looking at the answers, so that you're still going in blind,
Hmm.
you solve the same questions untimed. And the point that you raised earlier, right, the point about having seen the questions before, it won't make a difference because the only thing that's changing between the first and the second passes, right? So think of it as the first pass and the second pass. The only thing that's changing is the amount of time you give yourself. So you don't have any additional information. You don't have, nobody's told you the answer yet, right? So the
Hmm.
only thing that you're doing is you're saying, okay, fine, I've done them timed. Now let me give myself as much room as I want to think whatever I want, to analyze it as deeply as I want. And why do you want to do this untimed bit? I just want to be very clear about this. You know, when you think about something, right, when you learn something, these are pathways in your mind. Literally, these are pathways in your mind that need to be built up. Sometimes when I discuss something with a student, they'll be like, I get it, but the difference between getting it and applying it, right, that's a gap right there. So to actually apply these things, what you need to do is build those connections in your mind. Quick check, makes sense?
Yep. Yep. Makes sense.
Excellent. All right. All right, Simran's also giving me a yes. Perfect. So remember, this is not something that I'm forcing you to do. I'm just telling you that look, on your practice sets, right? There are different skills. So your thought processes also need to be worked on, but your test taking ability and your test taking skills also need work. So let's make sure that we do both and that we're not doing only untimed practice, because what will happen then is as we get closer to the exam, we won't have an idea about how good we are. We won't have developed that ability to just have a feeling for how much time we've spent on a question. So all of these things are important. Let's make sure that we work on them right from the beginning so that we don't get a shock as we get closer to the exam. Okay, now let's come back to this deceptively simple statement that you need to select the best option out of the 5 options given to you. Okay, so verbal is different from quant. This is an often underappreciated fact. Quant is something that I like to call binary logic, right? So things are either correct or incorrect in quant. If there is an option that is correct in quant, it will always be the correct option for that question. You can't have a new option which will suddenly become correct with a different option which will suddenly become correct. But the funny thing about verbal is verbal doesn't have any perfectly correct option as such that will always be correct. It always depends on the context that has been given to you. So you have a set of 5 options, right? And in those 5 options, maybe option A is correct. But if you take option A and put it in another set of 5 options, then maybe option A is not correct. That's the funny thing about verbal. And this is something that we need to become comfortable with, that verbal is not always about finding one option that will always stand out as, the correct option. So let me just ask you guys a quick question. If I give you something like this, right? Imagine that this is -10, this is +10, and this is 0. And we are talking about a CR question in which one option is correct and the other four are wrong, right? Of course, because on the GMAT, you always get one option correct and four incorrect options. So imagine that you've got this scale that goes from -10 to +10, right? Now, -10 means that it is absolutely incorrect, right? This is impossible. +10 means it is perfect. It is the perfect option. You will never get a better option than this. 0 means it's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with the situation that you're looking at. Now, I want you to give me your estimates of where the correct option will land on this scale. Where should the correct option be? Give me an idea. Either unmute yourself or put it in the chat window. Okay, Parikshit is saying it's relative to other options. That's why you go ahead with elimination. That's definitely one way to look at it. Okay. I think maybe we're giving it a little bit of thought over here. I'll tell you what I think, and then you guys can tell me whether you agree with that or not. So the correct option can be anywhere that's greater than 0, right? But up to and including +10. So just to put a number to it, the correct option doesn't have to be like a 7 or an 8. Not necessary. The correct option may be a 1, or the correct option may be like a 0.1, like a 0.1. Point is, it just has to be better than the other options. Now imagine that the other options are like all of them are on this side, right? Either all of the incorrect options are irrelevant or doing the opposite thing that from what you want. So the correct option may not be very, very convincing. It may like just land on a 0.1 or a 0.5 on the scale, and you may not be very happy marking it, but you recognize that it's better than the other options. Quick check, let me have a yes if this makes sense. If you think that, okay, fine, I am comfortable with the fact that, sometimes verbal is like this. Okay, I've got a yes from Parikshit, Vansh, and Kiran. Simran's also agreed. Shohini, one second, let me just check. Mihir, I'm not sure if Mihir is. Mihir, are you comfortable with this? Shohini's comfortable with this. Perfect. Okay, so remember, verbal is all about shades of gray. So you're going to have to select the best of the 5 options. It's never about, the one absolute correct option in the entire universe types of situation. Now, the final point that I want to discuss about verbal in general is you always aim for what is plausible, not what is necessarily just possible. And this really comes into the picture in critical reasoning. Let me just talk about the difference between plausible and possible. When you see a critical reasoning option, right, sometimes you're going to ask yourself, okay, what happens if, right? This what if. Asking yourself what if is not wrong in itself. The problem is when you start thinking about edge cases, right? There's this term I came across sometime back. It's the phrase is edge case. I'm not sure if you heard of this, and I'm not an expert in this. I just heard it in some other context. An edge case means something that is very, very rare. It's so close to never happening that it's very hard to plan for, right? The point is, when you're solving critical reasoning questions, you don't solve them thinking about the edge cases. In almost all critical reasoning questions, you're going to be thinking about what is more likely. Now, this is something we'll keep encountering in our critical reasoning questions. But because I'm not sure that I've explained myself properly, I'll just do a quick check over here. Has everyone got an idea about this? That you aim for a plausible interpretation. So when you see an option and that option says something, you think about what it is most likely going to mean, not what it could mean in some very, very, rare edge case scenario. Quick check. I'm not sure if I've explained it properly. But remember, if you're not sure, you can always unmute. You can always unmute and ask me to clarify. Okay, I think Simran says got it. But the others, this is very important for verbal. So I'm going to ask you to just spend a second on this, check. Does it sound okay, or are we not sure? If you're not sure, just unmute and ask your question. Okay, Vansh is also agreeing. Okay, we're getting some yeses. Okay, quick check, Parikshit, Mihir, if you're back. Parikshit, is this somewhat in line with what we could apply from now on?
Yes, Ajitesh. I'm just thinking out through couple of things from the past learning and all.
Absolutely, awesome. Okay, now see our question structure. Now, most of you, I'm guessing, have seen critical reasoning questions before. Critical reasoning questions typically follow this kind of pattern: stimulus, stem, options. You're going to get typically this order. Stimulus is where all your information is, right? So let's write that out: information. Stem is where the GMAT is telling you the task that has to be performed. In most cases, we just simplify that and say this is the question type. This is the type of question. And finally, you'll get your 5 options. Simran, please go ahead.
I cannot see your screen fully in spite of going to full screen. Is there something I can do about this?
Got it. So let me write this on the left hand side. So this is the stimulus, this is the stem, and these are the 5 options.
All right, works.
Right? Now, the last part, the last right hand side of your screen, don't worry about it. No content in our session is going to overflow into that area.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. I think Parikshit also has. Oh, wow. I didn't know that you could do this. Use control plus mouse to zoom out. Wow. I have.
How you
Yeah, go
zoom in,
ahead.
you zoom out, it works.
I can't believe that I'm so technologically challenged that I didn't know this till now. Wow. Okay, so thank you, Parikshit. Simran, I hope that helps a little bit. But otherwise, also don't worry about this. I'll just try to keep most of my writing on the left-hand side of the screen. Okay, now, what is your stimulus going to be? Your stimulus is most likely going to be something called an argument or a plan. These are two things that the GMAT absolutely loves in critical reasoning. Now, the majority of your questions are going to be like this. Now, an argument is when someone's trying to convince you of something, right? They'll give you reasons, they'll tell you what they want you to think, and they'll give you reasons for that. Now, arguments are very, very important. Recognizing arguments, breaking arguments down, very important. But that's not what we'll focus on in today's session. It'll be our very next session, right? This is fundamental knowledge. We'll need to spend time on this. But for now, let's just say that most of our critical reasoning questions are going to have arguments or a plan. A plan is like, somebody has a particular, desired outcome in mind, and they have a way of getting there, and they'll just put that plan up for you. Some critical reasoning questions will just be statements. They won't be trying to convince you of anything. They'll just put like a bunch of statements up on the screen for you. Now, the stem is where the GMAT tells you what it wants you to do. But normally it is relatively safe to just say this is the question type. Now, the better thing to do over here is to think about this as the task, but it's relatively safe to think of it as just a question type. Now, what are the major question types? You've got structure, right? Now, structure involves things like bold-faced questions. You could even say parallel reasoning over here, right? But mainly bold-faced questions. Now, don't worry about all these terms in case you've not seen them before. It's fine. We'll cover this in all our sessions. You also have assumption questions. You've got strengthen and weaken questions. Weaken questions, you could also say that category includes another category called logical flaw questions. But then you've got inference and conclusion questions. You've also got these evaluate questions, paradox questions, and as I said, parallel reasoning, you could put it in structure if you want, or you could keep it separate. Finally, you've got these complete questions. Now, complete questions will basically just give you a blank and say which of the 5 options is the one that you should put into this blank. Now, we don't want to get into these types today, but what I want to say about these complete questions is complete is not really a type, it's a format. So basically, one of the other question types will be used to form a complete question. So, for example, if somebody says, therefore, we should do this, because, right? So what that basically means is the GMAT in this case is asking you for a reason for this statement. We should do this. Therefore, we should do this. Therefore, we should do this is what they're trying to tell you, right? This is the main thing they're trying to convince you of. And the GMAT wants you to supply a reason for that. So this is going to end up being a strengthened question. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with all these different names for the question types? You may not have seen all of them before. Of course, we will be discussing them in later sessions. All right. I see a yes from Parikshit, Kiran, and Mihir. Quick check. Simran, Shohini, and Vansh. Simran's confirmed. Vansh and Shohini? Perfect. Now, we're going to take a look at a question. This is a GMAT question. I'm going to be giving you guys 2.5 minutes to solve the question. I mean, half a minute to find the question, 2 minutes to solve it. In case you solve it before 2 minutes, don't put your answer in the chat window. Once time is over and I tell you that 2.5 minutes are up, then we'll discuss our answers in the chat window. Please start. All right, so that's 2.5 minutes. First of all, please check your answers. The correct answer is E, the last option. So that's E for echo. Quick check. Before we start this question, I just want to check how many of you are comfortable with saying that E is the answer? Okay, 4 yeses, and on a scale of what, 10, we'll give it a 4. All right, I totally get that, Vansh. And Simran is saying yes. Okay, fair enough. Now, let's take a look at this particular question. And one of the things we'll talk about when we get to tactics is how you read a question, right? Like a CR question. Do you start from the top or do you start from the question stem? Right? That's one of the things we'll discuss in a while. But what I really, really want to stress is understanding. I mean, ideally, we'd like to understand the whole thing, like 100% of it, right? But when you look at this part, right, the information that has been given to you, it is absolutely critical that you understand what is happening over here. I'm going to give you my understanding of the stimulus, or at least this stimulus, and I'll quickly check whether you guys agree with that. Now, in this situation, what we are told is that, okay, there's some territory where archaeologists have discovered charred bone fragments. So let's put that down, charred bone fragments dating back 1 million years. Analysis of the fragments, which came from a variety of animals, showed they had been heated to temperatures no higher than those produced in experimental campfires. So, at this point, we seem to have some sort of connection between charred bone fragments and fire, right? So, let's put that down. These charred bone fragments have been heated to temperatures no higher than those produced in experimental campfires. So let's say charred bone fragments are some sort of indication of fire. And that's the information that we have. We don't have anything else over here. We have some small details, right? But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip that. And okay, let me just take a step back over here. What's happening over here is I have pre-knowledge of this question. On the day of the exam, I would not know whether I can just, forget about this variety of animals part, or deprioritize the 1 million years because it only ever came up in like one option. On the day of the exam, I would not know this, right? But that said, let's move ahead. The next task for us is to make sure that we're comfortable with the task itself, like what the question is asking us to do. Here, I want to get you guys into the picture. When you read this question stem, what do you think this question wants you to do? And for this, please remember, unmute yourself. This is going to take too long to type, or at least because I'm slow at typing, so I think it takes a lot of time to type. So unmute yourself and let me know.
It is asking to strengthen some point
Very good. What is it asking us to strengthen?
that this hominids are actually know how to use fire.
Fair enough. Okay. I see that Parikshit has also raised his hand. Parikshit, please go ahead.
I think so. There are two premises that are stated, and the second premises that is stated, right, has an assumption where the early nomads were able to use fire, right, and they had those kind of facilities. So the
Mhm.
question is primarily focusing on which of the option that is listed below can actually help us out in stating that premises as a fact, right? So I mean that's the answer we're looking for.
Mm, fair enough. I think you've described it in very broad terms, but very specifically, what type of question do we have? What is it asking us to do? Like, literally, what is the final deliverable?
Strengthening the assumption which is made.
Hmm. Okay, we'll come back to that. So half of that is spot on. The other one, I think we should modify slightly. Fair enough. Mihir, you've raised your hand. Please go ahead.
So basically, we are asked to link this charred bone fragments to the use of fire. So we have to strengthen this both these two terms.
Got it. I'll just add one more thing there. To the use of fire by early hominids, right?
Yes, sir.
Got it. Okay, now let me give all of you feedback on what you said. So, Shohini, you did classify the question correctly, and you did summarize most of it, right? The one thing that you missed out is this charred bone fragments bit. So, if I remember correctly, what you said is we have to show that early hominids used fire, right? If I'm correct, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that may have been what you said. That's fine. Yes, we have to show that, but we also need to remember the question is not just asking us to show that early hominids used fire. It's asking us to provide the best basis for the claim that the charred bone fragments are evidence of the use of fire. So we don't want to just show that early hominids used fire. We want to use the charred bone fragments as evidence of that. So that's something you could have added. Parikshit, I think you started off with a broad understanding of the question, which is fine. But at some point, you'll have to get to the question itself and be very clear about what the question is asking. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes, whether we want to form a mental summary of this task or not. But yeah, so I think that was fine. After that, I think you sort of attached the word assumption to it. No. So the correct way to put this would be the question is asking you to strengthen a conclusion. This is some sort of conclusion. The charred bone fragments are evidence of the use of fire by early hominids, and you want to provide the best basis for that claim, right? So over here, this is probably, you did classify it correctly. This is a strengthened question, but you're not strengthening the assumption, you're strengthening a possible conclusion. Quick check, Parikshit, is that okay? Oh, okay, got it. Perfect. Now, Mihir, this was well done. The thing about Mihir's answer is, see, when you read the CR question in front of you, right? When you read it, what you read and what you understand from what you read, there is a gap over there. And that gap comes down to things like, even things like personal experience, right? Like personal knowledge or generally your way of thinking, your strengths and your weaknesses. And it happens with everyone. It happens with me as well, right? So whenever someone says something, there is a gap between what they say and what you hear. Our job in critical reasoning is to minimize that gap. This is very important. We don't want to introduce too much of ourselves. In fact, we want to minimize our own contribution to what is being given to us. We want to keep as close as possible to the language and information that has been given to us without introducing ourselves into the picture, or at least minimizing our own contribution to that interpretation. So that's something I really liked in Mihir's answer. Mihir's answer was almost a word for word match with the question, right? And I don't mind that. A word for word match is better than changing the words to such an extent that you don't have an accurate idea of the task anymore. Okay, so that's gotten us now to the 5 options. We need to pick an option which strengthens the claim that the charred bone fragments are evidence of the use of fire by early hominids. Now, let me take the first option for you. The white stinkwood tree is used for building material by the present day inhabitants of Swartkans. Now, if you're reading this option and you think, what? Present day inhabitants? That's not been mentioned. Building material? That's not been mentioned. That's fine. But in our classes, we're going to do something else. We're going to say that all of this is irrelevant. We're not going to say that it's not mentioned. Now, this is very important. When we say that something is not mentioned, that is important for some question types like inference, conclusion. In other question types, you will get new information in almost every case, right? So there's a specific question type called must be true in which you cannot introduce any new information. But in things like strengthen, weaken, paradox, etc., you will almost always be seeing new information, right? So when we say new information, what we mean is this information is not already there in the stimulus or the stem. And it's okay. So the GMAT is going to give you new information, and then you have to evaluate whether that new information, for example, in this case, strengthens the claim. So we're not going to say that, oh, building material is wrong because the question never talked about building material. We're not going to say this option is wrong because the question never talked about present day inhabitants. We're going to say that this is wrong because there's no way that building material and present day inhabitants has any bearing or any relevance to a situation that involves showing that early hominids used fire by using charred bone fragments as evidence. So we're going to take option A out because it is irrelevant, not because it's not mentioned. Quick check. Give me a quick yes or a no, or ask your question. Unmute yourself and ask your question if you're not sure about this. Okay, Mihir and Simran are comfortable with this. Let me just get a quick check from the others. Kiran is also okay. Parikshit is comfortable. Shohini, option A, are we comfortable with this? Excellent. All right, now let me get you guys in on option B. Take your time, read option B, and tell me why option B is wrong. Also, just to remind you, please use your microphones. I mean, you don't have to type so much. Kiran is saying it's weakening the argument. Kiran, could you explain that? Like, unmute yourself, explain why it's weakening the argument.
Yeah, in the question stem, it was told that we have to make a proof that we have to submit an evidence which shows that those historians, someone used the fire. But here it is saying that they haven't used the fire. Only these forest fires caused that fragment charms to heat.
Good. I think you've got it.
Yeah.
Parikshit, is that similar to what you were thinking? Excellent. So normally what we do is we'll refer to this as an alternate cause. Think about it. If forest fires can give you the same temperatures that campfires can give you, then maybe these charred bone fragments came from forest fires and not campfires, right? So if there's an alternate cause, then that'll end up weakening. So if you're saying that, oh, Y could have also caused the thing that the question is saying X caused, then that's going to weaken the situation. Okay, so option B is out. Now, let's be clear, option B is out because it weakens our conclusion. Now, option C says the bone fragments are fitted together by the archaeologists to form the complete skeletons of several animals. Okay, so you got enough of the bone fragments to form complete skeletons, but how does that? I mean, just making a complete animal out of those bone fragments, how does that help you establish the link? So I think this is a clear, irrelevant option C. Quick check, is everyone comfortable with removing option C because it is irrelevant? Okay, that was very quick. I got 3 or 4 almost immediate yeses on this one. Okay, I think we're good with this one. Now, let me get you guys in on option D. Read option D, and when you're ready, unmute yourself and tell me why D for Delta is incorrect. Mihir, please go ahead.
So basically, they are introducing another reason that the early hominids used fire, apart from the charred bone fragments.
Very good. So, you know, I normally get 2 different responses to this question. The first one is, oh, this one is talking about 500,000 years ago, whereas the question was talking about 1 million years ago. So, they don't seem to be related to each other. That's fine. That's fine. You could absolutely attack the question like that. The other way is what Mir just mentioned. This option says, apart from the Swartkans discovery, there's reliable evidence that early hominids used fire as many as 500,000 years ago. Again, focus on this part, apart from the Swartkans discovery. Now, what was our task? Our task was to show that the charred bone fragments, so imagine, visualize it like this. Our task was to show that early hominids used fire, but we had to use charred bone fragments to show that they used fire. Right? We know that charred bone fragments are indicative of fire usage, and we had to go through charred bone fragments to fire to early hominids. Right? Option D says apart from the Swartkans discovery, but what was the Swartkans discovery? The charred bone fragments, that's what the Swartkans discovery was. So if an option starts by saying apart from the Swartkans discovery, you're not going to get very strong evidence that links the charred bone fragments to early hominids. And the reason for that is simple because the charred bone fragments were the Swartkans discovery, right? So the question is very specific. It doesn't want you to just show that early hominids used fire. It wants you to use those charred bone fragments to establish that they used fire. Quick check, is everyone comfortable removing D because it is irrelevant? I mean, at best, it could be like a very, very weak strengthener, but it's mostly just irrelevant. Okay, I've received multiple yeses on this. Parikshit is also confirmed. Okay, perfect. Shohini, is this one okay? Excellent. Now let's get to the correct answer. The bone fragments were found in several distinct layers of limestone that contained primitive cutting tools known to have been used by early hominids. Let's see what's happening over here. Till now, we had charred bone fragments, which was sort of linked to fire, right? They had been heated to temperatures that occurred in campfires. And our task was to get to fire from early hominids through charred bone fragments. The problem over here is right now we don't have any sort of link between the charred bone fragments and early hominids. We can't prove or we don't have any information that connects early hominids to charred bone fragments. So what does option E do? Option E gives us a new thing, right? And let's be clear, this is absolutely new. These primitive cutting tools, that was never mentioned in the stimulus. It's completely new information. But what option E does is it connects primitive cutting tools somewhat tentatively to charred bone fragments. And why am I saying tentatively? Because they were just found in the same layers of limestone. And the same layers of limestone basically means the same time period, right? It's not 100% connection, but at least they are in the same layers. If they were in different layers, then they would be completely different, right? Completely different time intervals. And what option E does is it says those primitive cutting tools were definitely known to have been used by early hominids. So now we have a connection between early hominids and fire through charred bone fragments because we have a connection between charred bone fragments and primitive cutting tools and between primitive cutting tools and early hominids. So now we've got the connection from early hominids to fire through charred bone fragments. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable visualizing it like this? Parikshit's confirmed. Kiran's confirmed. Vansh is also confirmed. Simran's raising her hand. Please go ahead, Simran.
Sir, I'm not very clear about how you inferred that it is connecting the several distinct layers of limestone that contain primitive cutting tools. How is that connecting with fire?
It's not connecting with fire. It's connecting with charred bone fragments. So let's read this. The bone fragments, right? So this is CBF, charred bone fragments.
Mm-hmm.
They were found in several distinct layers of limestone, and the same layers of limestone also contain primitive cutting tools, right?
Right.
So there is some sort of a connection, remember, tentative, but some sort of connection between charred bone fragments and primitive cutting tools.
Right.
Now, the question initially told us that the charred bone fragments were some sort of indicator of fire.
Okay.
From the
Understood.
question, remember, from the question.
Yeah.
So you had that connection between charred bone fragments and fire, and option E says there's a connection between primitive cutting tools and early hominids. So now you have this weird connection from early hominids to fire through charred bone fragments. Remember, this is important. The question asked you to use charred bone fragments to establish the link between early hominids and fire.
Understood.
Right?
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So Shohini's also confirmed. Perfect. Now, final question about this particular question. How many of you are like super happy with option E? Remember, I asked you this question at the beginning, but I want to ask you again. Do you find this super convincing? Parikshit saying no. Mir is saying no. Vansh, the best of the worst. Okay. Not super happy, but best of the lot. Okay. Okay. Kiran is saying somewhat. And same as Vansh. Fair enough. Okay. So, guys, that is absolutely the way you're looking at it is absolutely correct. You are going to be happy marking it as long as it's better than the other options, even if just objectively speaking you're not like super happy with it, right? So as long as it's better than the other options, and in this case all the other options are either weakening or irrelevant, right? So even if this option is only slightly strengthening, we're going to be okay marking it because it's the best of the 5 options. That's all we're looking for. Excellent. Now let's summarize some of this information. Understanding, right? When I see this word, it's such a it's just one word, and it seems like such a simple word, but there's so much that goes into this. When you read the stimulus that has been given to you, are you able to see the logic that they have used? Right? Remember, most of your questions will have arguments. Are you able to see how they are getting from the support to the conclusion? What are the possible gaps between that? It's very easy for me to say this, that you know understanding, just one word in this presentation, it's very very hard to do. The reason I'm just spending a little bit of time on this is it's the single most important thing when it comes to solving your critical reasoning questions. you know Some people believe that you don't have to fully understand your questions. You can just do something like word matching. But I think most of us would be aware that these kinds of hacks or tactics, they don't work reliably, especially on high difficulty questions. So understanding the information that has been given to you, that is absolutely critical, and that is what we will focus almost all our time on in these sessions, making sure that we understand what has been given to us. Anything beyond that is going to come under the heading of tactics, right? Small things that may or may not make that much of a difference. We'll discuss those things later. But the point is, we have to get into this habit of understanding the information that we have. And as we discussed, minimizing the gap between what they are telling us and what we are taking away from what they're saying. That is what we refer to as precise reading of the information. Be very, very clear about what they are telling you and be open to rereading the argument or the stimulus or different parts of the question if you have to. There's this kind of myth out there which says that once you read the question, you should not have to go back to it. I don't know where they're coming from on this. I think this is very, very unrealistic. I can personally tell you that I go back and reread multiple times, right? Especially if the stimulus is very long, dense, or difficult. It just sometimes has to happen. So my advice to you would be don't go for these simple sounding things where people tell you, oh, you just read it once and you're good. No, practically speaking, there are cases where you'll have to reread. You should be open to that on your exam. Now, sometimes people say that they benefit from making notes. I'm not going to say that I'm against this. I'm just going to give you the pros and cons. The advantage of making notes is that you'll get a better understanding of the argument and you will most likely get a more precise understanding of the argument. The disadvantage is it takes time. So my recommendation is, at the beginning, fair enough, go ahead, do it if you want. But as you get closer to your exam, try to keep it as a mental summary rather than physically writing it down for most questions. If you find a really difficult question that you feel that, okay, look, I need to keep track of the information they're giving me, do that. But recognize that you can't do it for all your critical reasoning questions because then that'll completely mess your time management up. So prefer making a mental summary, but try to keep physical notes only for the beginning. Try to get out of that later on. Now, this is something we've discussed before. After you solve a question, make sure that you're actively analyzing. Go back and ask yourself, what exactly did they say? And what exactly did I pick up from what they said? Try to identify these gaps because at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to reduce these gaps as much as possible. We just want to minimize them. So this is also another thing that we'll have to watch out for. Now, in terms of solving critical reasoning questions, we're going to assume that all our options are true. Now, you may have heard this before, and in most cases, the GMAT will make it easy for you. If you remember the stem from our previous question, it would have said something like, which of the following, if true? So whatever you see in the 5 options, just assume that it's true. You don't have to get into, oh, is this even possible or not? If your option says it, just say that, okay, yeah, that's true. I'm going to assume that it's true. And I'm going to go ahead and answer the question, assuming that whatever information they've given me in the 5 options is true. Next, as we discussed in the previous question, try not to think about whether just something has been simply mentioned or not for most of your questions. Instead, focus on relevance. Is this relevant to the issue that we're discussing? Not just, oh, has my question mentioned it or not? Because in most cases, you are going to get new information. And now for one of my favorite points, outside information. Now, you can see what the presentation is telling you. The presentation says you may need to use outside information. What do you guys think about outside information? Unmute and tell me. What have you heard about it? What do you think about it?
Basically, we are told that in strengthen and weaken questions, you have to use outside information.
So are you comfortable using your own outside knowledge? Are you comfortable bringing that in?
No, no, not outside knowledge, but the knowledge which is provided in the options.
Okay, so Mihir is saying stay laser focused on the information that the question is giving you or the options are giving you, but don't bring in outside knowledge. Fair enough. Any other thoughts on this?
I would somehow agree with Mihir what Mihir is saying. I mean, in fact, I have also read the same thing.
Okay, so Parikshit's read the same thing, and Shohini saying advice to minimize the usage of outside information. Okay, now we're getting a more nuanced look at this. Fair enough. Let me just give you a quick example, right? If somebody says that Apple's profits went down, right, in the year 2022, and you are asked to explain this, like what could help you understand why this happened, right? And the correct answer says that Apple's costs went up significantly. Significantly, I'm saying significantly, because suppliers increased their prices. Would you be happy marking this as the answer? This thing about costs. Let me have a yes or no on this one. Okay, Mihir is saying yes.
Ajitesh, can you just
Mhm.
repeat the statement, please?
Right. So imagine that the question, like the stimulus, has said that Apple's profits went down in the year 2022, right? And you need to pick an option which tells us why Apple's profits went down.
Okay, and the or one of the option is that cost increases because the supply cost increases, right?
Yes. And
Okay.
let me give you one more piece of information. The other four options are definitely wrong, right? Or they're irrelevant. They have nothing to do with whatever we're talking about. The other four options are definitely wrong. Then would you be happy marking this as the answer? Okay, Mehir, Vansh, and Simran have said yes. Okay, okay. Kiran's also said yes. Parikshit's also saying yes. Okay, got it. So over here, see, the answer would be absolutely what you would expect from a GMAT question, right? There's nothing new over here. But now Vansh has put it into words. What the GMAT expects you to bring in from outside is this relationship. Profit is equal to revenue minus expenses or costs. So this information, this relationship has not been given to you in the question. The stimulus is not mentioned, the STEM is not mentioned, the options are not telling you about it. But the GMAT just expects you to know this. And that's what we mean by outside information. Now remember, the GMAT does not specify exactly what outside information you're supposed to know. But CR questions are just so short that they can't possibly, So, for example, if a critical reasoning question talks about, the clothing industry in Veltria or something, right? Or clothing retailers in Veltria, or credit that is extended to them. I'm just remembering one question that I really like, right? They expect you to know these things like what is a retailer, right? What is the meaning of extending credit? And similarly over here, they would expect you to know this relationship between profit and revenue and costs. Again, they don't give you a list of things that you're expected to know. They just say that information that a person can be reasonably expected to know, right? In a lot of critical reasoning questions, you're going to have to use outside information. The only thing that I'll say over here is the GMAT never needs you to use specialized information. And in fact, even if you have specialized information about a particular topic, you should not use it, right? So, something that a general person can be expected to know, yes. Anything more than that, no. Quick check. Is everyone comfortable with this? Okay, I've got a few yeses. Parikshit is also confirming. Simran and Shohini. Kiran, perfect. Just one more point before the next question. We've sort of discussed this before, but please try to avoid word matching, right? Word matching just means looking for similar words in an option, like finding an option which has as many words that are there in the stimulus and marking it. Needless to say, this is very, very risky. Please try to avoid it. All right, next question. Again, 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead. Okay, so that's 2.5 minutes. In case you were able to complete this question, so let me know what you think the correct answer is in this question. Okay, I've got a couple of responses. I've got multiple responses over here. Okay. Quite convinced with the okay, quite convinced as compared. Oh, that's interesting because that is what I want to discuss in this question. Okay, now over here, let me just quickly summarize the information that we have. We have a sort of paradox. A paradox means you expected one thing, but you actually got something else. Now, why is this a paradox? Because basically, what they're telling us is, oh look, bamboo is amazing. Bamboo is strong. Bamboo is less expensive, right? Bamboo is always readily available, right? So it has all these positive things. It has all these things going for it: positive, positive, positive. Now, what's the surprising thing? The surprising thing is building with bamboo makes better economic sense than building with steel or concrete, except where land values are high, right? And now let's move on to the stem. The stem says we need to explain this exception. And what was that exception? Except where land values are high. We need to explain that. Okay. Now, let me quickly remove option A for you. Option A says buildings constructed of bamboo are less likely to suffer earthquake damage than are steel and concrete buildings. Now, if we think about it, when we want to say why bamboo is not used when land values are high, basically what we are looking for is a negative of bamboo, right? Something that's not good, which makes it a bad choice. But option A is giving you another positive. So basically, what option A does is if you add option A to the information that you have, you'll get bamboo strong, bamboo is less expensive, bamboo is always available, and bamboo is good for protecting you against earthquakes. So that doesn't help you understand why bamboo should not be used, especially where land values are high, right? So it doesn't give you any explanation for that exception. So option A is out. Now let me bring you guys in. When you're comfortable, let me know. And you're right, B for Bravo is correct. But when you're ready, please unmute and tell me, why is B correct? I see that both Vansh and Parikshit have raised their hands. Vansh, you can go first, and then we'll move on to Parikshit.
Yeah, I mean, the place I took here was majority of the elimination part. Found this answer more convincing, talking about the, the question stem that is there. So yeah, that's the reason I took this particular answer.
So let me clarify. Did you solve this question through elimination, or are you happy with B? Like you're like, yes, B is the answer.
Kind of both, to be very honest. This
Mhm.
is the one that is talking about the bamboo houses in the urban areas. So yeah, kind of both.
Okay. And why do you think B is correct?
Why do I think? I don't have any answer. I mean, of course, the elimination part is something that I considered here.
Fair enough.
So,
So maybe you went elimination first on this. That's a valid strategy.
right,
All
yeah.
right. Let's move on to Parikshit.
I think I've followed Vansh's approach only. Right. So
Mhm.
while eliminating, I kept B as an option that it could be possible answer. Right.
Mhm.
Uh, then moved eliminating CDE, and B was something that why I was able to zero down was A. It says that expect where the land values are high,
Mhm.
right? So as you said, some general information that you can obviously use, right? So if the land values are high, and you have to make it more affordable or something of that sort, then I mean you need to build multi-stories building, and which is not possible with bamboo, right? So that was the thought process that went behind in choosing the option.
Very good. This is the perfect way to get through this question. So let's summarize this. Option B is correct. And this is a GMAT question, right? Option B is correct, but it needs us to bring in outside knowledge because the question never says that, when land values are high, multi story buildings are more likely. It doesn't say that. You have to use that general knowledge of yours to say that, okay, land values are high means multi-story buildings are more likely. Multi-story buildings, bamboo is not suitable for that. That's what option B says, right? Therefore, I have a reason to say that bamboo cannot be a good option for high land value areas. Okay, so we know what's going on with B. We needed to get outside knowledge in to solve this question. Now, the second part of what Pariksha did is equally important. And this is what Vansh also did. Rely on elimination. Anytime that you feel unsure that, okay, can I bring in this much outside information or not, right? So trust me, some people are not comfortable saying that, oh, yeah, I can just say that, when land values are high, then multi-story buildings are more likely. They're not comfortable doing that. And therefore, they don't mark option B because they think I can't bring in that outside information. Now, over here, two things. We need to remember that for some GMAT questions, we will have to do that. There's no other way, right? So some people say that you cannot use outside information. Let's be clear, that is not correct. You sometimes have to use outside information. So that's one part of it. But what Vansh and Pariksha did is very important. They backed that up with elimination. So if you're not sure that, can I get this piece of information? Can I use it? Then try to eliminate as many of the other options as possible before you mark your option, right? So in case you feel that I'm not sure, then use elimination. On the day of the exam, you will be solving using a combination of elimination and selection. It's a natural thing. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to go 100% elimination. You don't have to go 100% selection. A mix of both is more realistic. Perfect. So very good. I like the way we approached option B. This is exactly how I recommend marking option B. Now let's quickly remove the other options. Option C. In order to protect it from being damaged by termites and beetles, bamboo must be soaked at some expense in a preservative. Now, again, this is slightly weird because it says at some expense, doesn't sound like it's too expensive. But the other part is, what does this have to do with land values are high, right? Are we saying that you're going to protect against termite and beetle damage only when land values are high? That's a little hard to believe. So the point is, this is a small expense. It doesn't seem like a big deal. So this is probably not the answer. Option D. In some tropical areas, bamboo is used to make the scaffolding that is used during large construction. Scaffolding is just the thing that is around the building. So if you make the scaffolding with bamboo, that doesn't give you any reason to think that you can't make the building with bamboo. So option D is also out. Now, option E. Bamboo growing in an area where land values are increasing is often cleared to make way for construction. Did anybody find this option slightly tempting? Anyone? Or were we like, yeah, direct removal, this is out? Okay, Simran is saying yes to this, option E. Fair enough. Parikshit, I see that you've unmuted.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
it was, and for me, it was very much irrelevant for the, answer that specific you were looking from the questions.
And why was it irrelevant?
It has nothing to do with, why people are using, why steel and concrete is being used for high value lands. This explanation has nothing to do.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's see in how many ways this option is different from what the question is talking about. So first of all, it's talking about areas where land values are increasing, right? It's not saying land values are high. It's just saying land values are increasing. So that's one thing, right? But the reason why so many, and this is a high difficulty question, right? If you open up the latest official guide, it's one of the uh, this is question number 618. Yeah, this is one of the hard questions. So why is it hard? Because option E has a lot of that word matching that some people look for. So people see this land values increasing and bamboo's removed. They mark this option because of that. But at the end of the day, what is happening? Option E is just telling us that bamboo is removed from an area to make way for construction. So if imagine that this is the area on which you're about to build. Now, if you're about to build over there, isn't it okay to say that, yeah, the bamboo that is on that area is removed, right? That doesn't stop you from building with bamboo, right? Just because you need to clear the area, because obviously you need to clear the area. If bamboo is already growing there, you can't build in an area where bamboo is already there. So you'll have to remove that bamboo and then build, right? Option E doesn't tell you that you can't do that building with bamboo. That's the problem with E. Quick check, Simran, are we comfortable with this?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right. And I went very quickly over this question. If you have any doubts, please feel free to ask, but I'll try to keep the next part of our discussion really quick so that you have enough time to prepare for the match. I'm sure that a lot of you are watching. Um, which team are we supporting today? Absolutely. All right. Now, we're going to talk about a few tactics and a few myths. And this is going to be a very fast discussion, but I want you guys to give me your opinions if you've heard something about some of these things that we're talking about, right? So, the first tactic is stopping after finding the correct option. So, imagine that you have 5 options and you reach option B, right? This is like the second option or the third option. And you're like, no, that's the right answer. After that, should you bother reading the other options or should you just move on to the next question? Let me have your thoughts on this. And please unmute and tell me.
Yeah, I mean, definitely going through all the options. I've actually made a lot of incorrect, answers due to this, like stopping in the middle. And yeah, the C option is correct. I don't even have to read further. But yeah, going through all the options is the correct approach.
Okay, Vansh is saying go through all the options. Mihir and I think Parikshit have raised their hands. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. We should read all the options and then select the right one.
Okay, Parikshit.
I mean, you just said, right? So answers are always relative, and you have to find the best one, right? So even if you find the most possible answer, you should check all the options and then select one.
Excellent. So, and I see Simran has also written that we should not stop. Good. I think all of you are on the right track. The only thing I'll add over there is, see, in an exam situation, it's very hard to predict which strategy is always correct. Okay, let me not call this a strategy. This is a tactic, right? There's a tactic. It's not a strategy. It's very hard to predict what is going to be correct or what is going to be not correct. Now, what I would say is this is a risky strategy. So if you decide to use it, this is going to be an executive decision that you are taking, right? So at some point, let's say that you're under time pressure. If you're under time pressure, you may have to do this, right? That's all I'm saying. I would, of course, personally advise you to read all the 5 options. And I still remember I was taking one of those GMAT practice tests, and there was this CR question that I was doing. And I think it was practice test 4. I got to an option, I was like, yeah, let me just mark it and move on. And then I thought, okay, let me read the other options. I read the next option, I was like, okay, that one is correct. Right. So it absolutely happens. Just be aware that if you do this, you're taking a risk. That doesn't mean that you should not do it. It just means you should be aware that you're taking a risk. All right. Now, what about this thing? Pre-thinking. It's a term that you will not find outside the GMAT, right? I mean, I haven't looked into this in the last few years, but earlier when I was researching this, because it seems to be like a big thing in the GMAT prep world, I found that outside the GMAT, I couldn't find any references to this, any research papers that were looking at the impact of this sort of strategy on learning outcomes, nothing like that. But that doesn't mean that it's bad or it can't be used. But what do you guys think? Have you come across this, and what are your experiences with this?
I have actually read through in couple of study materials, and I think the core idea was you structure the CR and then pre-think break it down into arguments and assumptions and all, and think what could be the possible answers, and then while searching the options you look at that, right? So that's what I've at least read in the past.
Right. And I think I have found two different definitions of this term, right? Some people say that pre-thinking is trying to come up with one option before you get into the 5 options, right? Right. Like try to predict what the correct answer is. Other people say that pre-thinking just means try to come up with one assumption before getting into the 5 options. My advice is use it if you feel that it's helpful for you. But my guess is that it's not going to have a major impact on your accuracy. I don't think it'll hurt your accuracy or your approach. Parikshit, please go ahead.
Ajitesh, this is one thing that I wanted to speak specifically about, right? So sometimes in
Hmm.
using elimination technique, you end up getting into two options,
Hmm.
right? And this pre-thinking is, I believe, at least in my practice, it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you get the right answer because you've already thought and it is matching, and sometimes it has got me wrong answer, and the other answer was right. So um, not sure, uh, uh, I mean, while if you're in practice of doing this, what is your advice? Like, should you just scrap it off and start learning from beginning? You are already aware of some background about me, so I mean, just wanted to understand from you.
Right. So I'll tell you what my experience has been. Again, I haven't made any effort to research this in the last few years. I think pre-thinking has become, or it was, more of a marketing thing than an academic thing, if that makes any sense. When we spoke with some students who said that pre-thinking helped them, we couldn't get very good definitions of what pre-thinking was or why it helped them. My guess is that they basically were just practicing a lot, and that understanding aspect, they became really good at it, understanding arguments. I think that's what happened. Now, as far as what it does, I think Simran's raised a very good point. Some people will benefit and some people won't. I'll tell you what my experience has been over the last, many, many years. For some people, if they actually try to predict an answer, what's going to happen is they're going to look at an option and they're going to mark an option that is similar, even if that option is wrong. So they will get biased towards it, right? That's one weakness. For others, it might be a benefit. Like, I've thought of an option, and if I find that option in my 5 options, great, right? I'm going to mark that. I'm going to save time. But as we discussed, that's kind of a risky thing to do, right? The other thing, and this is what I feel a lot of my students keep telling me. See, some of my students are very, very good at critical reasoning, right? Because they are able to think about many things. So if someone asks them or someone gives them a situation and says, okay, what is the explanation for this? They will not think of one thing. They will start thinking of many things. And that'll waste their time. Even if one of the things they think of is in the 5 options. I mean, there's a possibility there won't be. But they'll think of too many things. And that could be a problem in itself, right? So for me, what I like to tell students is, look, this thing is not like a magic wand or something. It's not like a button. You just push it and suddenly your CR has improved by multiple percentile points. It's not going to be like that. If you think it's something that's helping you, go ahead. Maybe it has a psychological impact on you. Fine, but don't expect it to replace that thing we discussed about understanding. Understanding is where you're going to make or break your answer. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if I. Awesome.
So no, I think Ajitish, a few things will come with the practice, right? So I mean, taken. I mean, suggestions taken. Thank you, Simran. Also, uh, we'll practice and see. How I am improving on this. Yeah.
Exactly. This is what it means to be a good test taker. You don't just accept what someone's telling you, even if that someone is me. You take advice from others, you evaluate it, check that against your experience, and then see whether you want to go ahead with it or not. All right. The next one is relying on patterns. Relying on patterns. There are certain patterns we're going to discuss in our classes. Now, sometimes what happens is students, when they start solving a question, they'll be like, okay, I immediately need to categorize the correct answer into a certain pattern. This is incredibly risky. I want you to keep an open mind when you're doing critical reasoning. Don't rely on patterns, right? This is not the way to get a high score in critical reasoning. The next one is the order in which you read your question. So, some people like to read STEM first, then they head to the stimulus, and then they'll go to the 5 options. Some people read it top to bottom. Let me get a quick idea. What do you guys do? STEM or stimulus first? Okay, Mihir, Parikshit, Vansh, STEM. Simran is saying top to bottom. Kiran is saying STEM. Top to bottom. Fair enough. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer over here. It's just up to you. Whatever you're comfortable with. For what it's worth, I read it top to bottom. And for me, the reason is I find that it doesn't make a difference to my accuracy, and going in a different order actually slows me down a bit. So I just go top to bottom. But see, again, this is one of those things where you can take a call, right? So the order in which you read your question is not going to significantly impact your logical ability or your ability to solve the question. It may have a small impact. And if that's something that you're comfortable with, absolutely just go read it stem first or read it top to bottom, whatever works for you. Now, mental summary, I strongly recommend this. Mental summary means after reading a stimulus, do you have like a pretty good idea of the flow of logic, and are you able to express it in like a couple of sentences maybe? So, are you able to get the gist of what they're telling you, right? So, mental summary, I feel, is a good idea. This is, of course, even more important in situations where, sometimes people read a question and they're reading it, but they're not actually understanding it. Literally, they're reading the words, but they're not able to actually see what's happening. If that happens, and then you get into your 5 options, you're going to find that it'll be very hard for you to answer the question if you haven't understood it and at least got the gist of what they're saying before you head into the 5 options. Now, you could also use a grid. A grid just means, have like an A, B, C, D, E. Now, obviously, on the GMAT, you're not going to see these letters like A, B, C, D, E, but at least they help you track, these 5 options. Now, how does this help you? If you remove an option and you are absolutely sure that it's wrong, you put an X next to that, right? So that you don't get tempted to read that option again. This may save you a little bit of time. Now, you can do this. You can use this grid. I think Parikshit is saying he might be rereading certain options, or he's saying that he uses a grid. Parikshit, do you use a grid or do you reread?
I use grid a lot. In fact, in my maths also. I mean, it's very like, so you create a grid for all the questions. And you don't have to rewrite whatever you have, eliminated in first. And it saves you time,
Right.
basically, for me.
Absolutely. I 100% agree that a grid is absolutely a tactic that we can adopt. So try it out when you're solving questions. If you feel comfortable with it, go ahead. And if you feel that you don't need it, or you're disciplined enough, or you can keep track without needing a grid, fine, fair enough. But yeah, this is absolutely a valid tactic, and you should use it if you feel you need to. And the last point is eliminate only if you're sure that an option is wrong. Sometimes what I find is a student looks at an option, can't understand it, right? Is not sure about it, and then eliminates it. That's not what elimination means. Elimination means you remove an option that you are dead sure is wrong. Elimination doesn't mean that you remove it just because you don't know what it's saying, right? So if you're unsure, hold on to it, because if you are guessing, you should at least know that you're guessing. You should not think that, oh no, I've got this, right? So elimination means remove only if you're sure. And if you're not sure, then hold on to that option. Don't consider that option as eliminated just yet. I still remember on my first GMAT, right? I saw this one critical reasoning question that was just dependent on one word. And I was able to eliminate 4 options, but I spent a lot of time on that question trying to understand why the correct option is correct. And I could do that because I'm an instructor and I need to do things like this, right? The point I'm trying to make is if you see a situation like that where you're able to eliminate 4 options, you don't have to understand the final option. You can just mark it. But be sure about your eliminations. So if you're not sure, then don't consider that. Don't flag that in your mind as an elimination. Flag that as, okay, I'm unsure and I'm going to guess between these 2 options. There are certain questions called structure questions that can be done very quickly. If you see some of those, you probably don't want to guess on those questions. We'll discuss this question type later on. You may want to guess on question types that you're generally not that strong at. But again, this is like a last resort type of tactic. We typically don't want to use this unless we're absolutely running out of time. All right, final section before our last practice question, myths and facts. Let me put a few up over here. One of the things about critical reasoning is there is no math involved in GMAT critical reasoning, right? So it's easy to make a critical reasoning question that tests math, but the GMAT doesn't do that. So this is something that you guys might already be familiar with. There is no math in your GMAT critical reasoning questions. Now, the next one is something that some people worry about. Do I need to learn vocabulary for GMAT critical reasoning? The answer is that the GMAT doesn't try to test your vocabulary the way that the GRE tries to test your vocab, right? But at the end of the day, the exam is in English, so it depends on the test taker. If you find that there are many words in critical reasoning that you're not sure about, I strongly recommend that you start making a list of those words so that, it becomes better for you over time. Now, this one, some people say it, but honestly, most people are not going to believe this. Let me know what you guys think. Some people think that one option, like option C, is more likely to be correct than the others. So you should just guess on this option. Has anybody have you heard this? Do you believe it? Let me have a yes, no over here. Like one option is more likely to be correct. Okay, Parikshit is saying no, which is good. Kiran is also saying no. Again, good. Shohini, that's fine. I totally get that. Have a good day. And I will try to wrap this up as quickly as possible. Thank you for attending. Vansha said no. Fair enough. Got it. So that's it. There's no option that is like more likely to be correct. Every option has pretty much the same probability of being correct as the others. Now, how about this one? Some people think that the GMAC purposely places like very close options right next to the correct answer. Have you heard anything like this? Oh, Mihir is saying yes. Okay. Parikshit is saying no. Simran is saying no. Vansh and Kiran. Kiran is saying no. And Vansh. Exactly. It's more of a conspiracy theory than a myth. Some people think the GMAC is like purposely, deliberately trying to put very close options next to the correct answer. It's not true. What most likely happens is the GMAC randomizes the answer key. So that's what is actually probably happening. So this is as Vansh said, we should probably call this one a conspiracy theory than a myth. How about this one? This is a very popular one. Two correct options. Is it possible to have two correct options in a GMAT question? I mean, GMAT, critical reasoning question.
I
Simran
believe
is saying
two
no.
options that sound correct, but no two correct options. So yeah.
That is perfect. So, two options that we may have a little bit of difficulty choosing between, yes. But two options that are actually both correct, no, that doesn't happen on the GMAT. The final one we'll take is some people think that boldface questions are always hard, like high difficulty questions. This is not necessarily true. You can have easy boldface questions, you can have medium difficulty boldface questions, and you can have high difficulty boldface questions. So all of those possibilities exist. Excellent. And that brings us to the final part of today's class. So again, 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead. I'll let you know when time is up. Okay, so that's 2.5 minutes. Please check your answers. The correct answer is D for Delta. Quick check. Okay. Mihir's comfortable with D. Simran's also comfortable with D. Kiran's comfortable. And Vansh and Parikshit is about to tell us. Perfect. Now I'm going to quickly walk you through a couple of interesting things about this question. The conclusion of this question has something to do with whether the plan should be rejected. So this is the conclusion. The plan should be rejected, and then they give you the reason that it unfairly forces drivers to absorb. But the interesting thing about this question is the stem has nothing to do with whether the plan should be accepted or rejected or whether it is fair or unfair to drivers. Nothing. All of that goes out of the window. The question is only about casting doubt or weakening the effectiveness of the plan to finance this, right? So whatever the plan is to raise that money, we just need to cast doubt on the effectiveness of that plan. We don't have to worry about whether it's fair to drivers or unfair to drivers. Now, let's take a couple of these options out. A says, before the authority increases tolls, it is required by law to hold public hearings at which objections can be raised. Great. So objections can be raised. Maybe they are raised. Maybe they aren't raised. We don't know. And even if they are raised, do they affect the plan? We have no information about this. So the plan is still effective, as in the plan can still be a good plan, even if people object to it. So option A is not really affecting the effectiveness of the plan. Option B, the authority must pay a private contractor to adjust the toll collecting machines. This seems like a tiny expense, right? Like in the grand scheme of things, if you're paying someone to adjust a few machines, how much of an impact can it have, right? So option B is out. But now we come to the option that I really want to discuss. In this question, a lot of people end up, again, this is a high difficulty question, and a lot of people end up marking option C. How do we take option C out? Whenever you're ready, unmute and let me know your thought process. Parikshit, please go ahead.
Uh, I mean, I kept it as an option, Ajitesh.
Mhm.
I mean, before moving to D and E, I mean, I thought, okay, this could be one reason because, I mean, they essentially we were checking about the effectiveness of the plan, right? And I thought that, I should keep it.
Fair enough. But did you then select option D or did you eventually remove option C?
When I read D, I thought D was more effective because, it was more convenient, like convincing to me for the, plan that they were looking at. Then I eliminated C.
Fair enough. So you went with selection. Simran, please go ahead.
Parikshit said. So option D for me was more convincing because if commuters actually shift, if in the past 20% of them shifted to a alternate route,
Mhm.
then that would have a more long-term effect than commuters just buying tickets before the increase is coming into effect. So the 20 commuters shifting to an alternate route will have no impact on the strategy that is being implemented.
Mhm.
Versus the commuters buying tickets before it is the strategy is implemented would have a short term effect, and hence I chose
And and if I may ask, why do you think the long-term impact is something we should be concerned about?
because then the strategy completely fails, right? In the
Oh, I
in our option
go ahead.
C, the strategy
Mhm.
may or may not fail.
I think you've got it. The only thing I'll add over there is the long-term impact is very relevant over here because this plan is a 5-year plan. I think sometimes when we're doing this question, right, we end up forgetting that this plan is for 5 years. So if people are buying tickets, like extra tickets, are they going to be buying tickets for 5 years? That's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Vansh, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, I in this particular option, I felt that the word many, many commuters, This was kind of undefined. Many could mean, two commuters, many could mean millions of them. So that's why I felt that this option wouldn't be the ideal one. That's why I rejected it. So yeah.
Right. So that is an approach to critical reasoning that in our classes, we typically tend to avoid that. So a lot of people, they advocate that we should try to avoid options that have some of these, fudge words like many or some. Others say that you should avoid options that have very extreme words like none or all, right? We typically focus on evaluating every option in the context of the other options, even if it has some of these words, right? So we try to evaluate the impact of that option given the information that it's giving us. Fair enough. Now, option D, when tolls were last increased on the two bridges in question, almost 20% of the regular commuter traffic switched to a slightly longer alternative route that has since been improved. Now, what are the good things about this option? 20% shifted the last time this was done, and that route has now become better. So now maybe more will shift. We don't know, right? But it seems like a pretty good option. Now, there are two things I want to discuss over here. The first one is last increased. Now, sometimes when people say that they don't want to mark this option, they say that, but this happened last time. How can we be sure that it'll happen this time? Now, over here, the answer to that question would be we're not sure. We're not sure, but this is at least some reason to think that the plan is not going to be effective, right? So it may not be 100%, watertight, but at least it gives us some reason to think that. The second one is, and this is the point that we'll really take away from this question. Remember what we discussed about plausible versus possible. And for that, I'm going to ask you to think about what option C said again. Option C said people will buy more tokens, right? But the plan is for 5 years. Sometimes students ask me, isn't it possible that everyone will buy tokens for the next 5 years before the plan is put into effect? Isn't it possible? Now, my answer to that is, of course, it's possible. But how likely do you think it is? Like, is it reasonable for us to say that people are going to buy enough tokens for the next 5 years so that the entire plan doesn't work for the next 5 years? So, when you see an option like this, right, remember there may be some extreme edge cases. And in those edge cases, maybe that option will become correct. But we can't solve verbal like that. Verbal has to be solved with the most likely interpretation, not just what is like possible in some really unlikely situation, right? Quick check, is everyone comfortable with this? Plausible versus possible? All right, I've got yeses from everyone. Perfect. Now, to finish up, the last option just says the chairman is a member of the club that has registered strong opposition. Again, if the club has registered strong opposition, we don't know the chairman of thinks and whether the chairman's thoughts are going to affect the effectiveness of the plan. So the plan could still be a great plan, even if this club thinks that, we're going to object to it. So option E is out. All right. So on that note, let's break for today. Thank you all so much for attending this session. I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoy the match. Have a great Sunday. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have. But for now, again, have a great day. Vansh, you're welcome, Vansh. Have a great day as well. You're welcome, Kiran. Thank you. And Mihir, you're welcome. Have a good day. You're welcome, Simran. I'll see you in the next session as well.
Thank you, Ajitesh, for listening us so patiently.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for attending.